At 11:47 p.m., on a storm-soaked highway, Daniel Harper made a choice most people wouldn't. He almost kept driving. The rain was relentless. The road was empty. And up ahead, barely visible through the downpour, was a stranded car with its hazard lights blinking weakly in the darkness. Inside that moment, Daniel had a decision to make. The same decision we've all faced at some point. Do you stop? Or do you protect yourself and move on? He told himself it wasn't safe. He told himself someone else would help. He told himself it wasn't his problem. But then he saw her, a woman standing alone in the cold rain, arms wrapped around herself, completely stranded, and something inside him wouldn't let him drive away. So he pulled over. He didn't know her name. He didn't know her story. He didn't know that this simple act of kindness would follow him home. He gave her a ride to a gas station, bought her a coffee, let her use his phone. It felt like nothing extraordinary, just a decent human being doing what decent human beings should do. She thanked him, looked him in the eyes, told him he was a good man, and then she disappeared into the night. By morning, Daniel had already forgotten about it, until 6:12 a.m., when pounding fists shook his front door. Not one knock, not two, but the kind of knock that makes your heart stop. When he opened the door, armed agents were standing on his porch. 3 of them, dark uniforms, serious faces. "Mr. Daniel Harper, you need to come with us." No explanation, no warning. Just like that, the man who stopped to help a stranger was being escorted into a black SUV while his neighbors watched in shock. Daniel's mind raced. Had he helped a criminal? Was he in danger? Was this some kind of mistake? But the truth was far more shocking than he could ever imagine, because the woman he helped wasn't just stranded, and the road he stopped on wasn't just a highway. It was part of something much bigger, something dangerous. And now, because of one decision made in the rain, Daniel was on someone's radar. This isn't just a story about a knock on the door. It's a story about kindness in a world that often punishes it. It's about fear, courage, and the split-second choices that can change your life forever. So before you decide what you would have done, ask yourself this. If you saw those hazard lights in the dark, would you stop? Stay with me, because what happened next will make you question everything you thought you knew about helping strangers. At 11:47 p.m., on a silent stretch of highway swallowed by rain and darkness, Daniel Harper made a choice that would follow him into morning and beyond. The storm had arrived without warning. 1 minute the sky was clear. The next it was roaring. Rain pounded against the asphalt like 1,000 tiny drums, and lightning split the horizon in blinding flashes. Daniel tightened his grip on the steering wheel of his aging pickup truck as the wipers struggled to keep up. It had been a long shift at the warehouse. His back ached. His eyes burned from staring at inventory sheets under fluorescent lights for hours. All he wanted was to get home, heat up leftovers, and collapse into bed. The highway was nearly empty, just a lonely ribbon of wet black stretching endlessly ahead. The town lights were miles behind him now. Out here, there were no street lamps, no houses, no open businesses, just darkness. That's when he noticed a faint blinking glow in the distance. Hazard lights. At first, he thought it was a trick of the rain. But as he drove closer, the image sharpened. A dark sedan parked awkwardly on the shoulder, hood raised. Steam or rain mist drifted from front, and beside it stood a woman. She hugged herself against the cold wind, her silhouette illuminated every few seconds by lightning. She looked small against the vast emptiness of the highway. Daniel's heart began to pound, not from fear, but from hesitation. He had heard the stories. Everyone had. Stage breakdowns, setups, robberies. Social media was full of warnings. Don't stop for strangers at night. He eased his foot off the gas. Keep driving, his mind whispered. You don't know who she is. Someone else will stop. But as he passed her car, his headlights swept across her face. She looked young, maybe early 30s. Her hair was plastered to her cheeks from the rain. Her expression wasn't angry or suspicious. It was worried and tired. Daniel drove another 50 yards. His knuckles tightened around the steering wheel. He pictured his younger sister, years ago, stranded after her car broke down in winter. She had waited nearly 2 hours before someone stopped. Daniel remembered the panic in her voice when she told him about it. He exhaled sharply. 5 minutes, he muttered, just to see what's going on. He checked his mirrors, slowed down, and carefully pulled over behind the sedan. His headlights lit up the scene, offering at least some sense of visibility. Rain immediately soaked through his jacket as he stepped out. The woman turned quickly, startled at first, then visibly relieved. "Hey!" Daniel called out over the storm. "Are you okay?" I think so," she replied, raising her voice to compete with the wind. "My car just shut off. It started making this horrible sound, and then everything died." Daniel nodded and walked toward the open hood. He wasn't a professional mechanic, but he'd grown up fixing things with his dad. He knew the basics. He leaned in, rain dripping from his hair onto the engine. The battery terminals were badly corroded. One of the cables looked loose. It wasn't something that could be fixed with a quick adjustment. Not in this weather. Not without tools. "You're not going to get this running tonight," he said honestly. "Even if we could fix the battery, something else might be wrong." Her shoulders sagged. "That's what I was afraid of." "Do you have a phone?" She looked embarrassed. "It died an hour ago. I was using the GPS, and I forgot my charger." Daniel hesitated again. Every alarm bell in his head reminded him how strange the situation was. Late at night, isolated road, a stranger with no phone. But her voice didn't tremble with manipulation. It trembled with cold. "There's a 24-hour gas station about 10 miles back," he said. "I can give you a ride there. It's well lit. You can call for help." She studied him carefully. He understood that look. She was weighing the same risks he had. "Okay," she said finally. "Thank you." Before leaving, Daniel grabbed a small flashlight from his truck and placed it inside her car on the dashboard. "Just in case," he said, "so it's visible." It wasn't much, but it felt responsible. She locked her vehicle and hurried toward his truck. As they climbed inside, the sound of rain softened against the metal roof. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "I'm Daniel," he said, breaking the silence. "Elena," she replied. He glanced at her briefly. Up close, she didn't look careless or reckless. She looked composed, even under stress. There was something observant about her eyes. "Sharp, what were you doing out here?" he asked casually. "Traveling," she answered after a small pause. "I had to make a stop in the next city." Her answer was simple. Too simple. Daniel didn't push further. The truck's heater hummed as they drove back toward town. Lightning flickered across the sky, briefly illuminating the fields around them. The world felt strangely suspended in time, just two strangers moving through a storm. After a few minutes, Elena spoke again. "You didn't have to stop." Daniel gave a small shrug. "I almost didn't." She smiled faintly. "What changed your mind?" He thought about it. "I guess I'd hoped someone would stop for me." She nodded, as if that answer mattered more than he realized. When they finally pulled into the gas station, it felt like an island of safety in the sea of darkness. Bright fluorescent lights reflected off puddles. A single clerk stood behind the counter inside. Daniel parked near the entrance. "You can use my phone," he said, handing it over. She accepted it carefully, stepping outside under the awning to make her call. Daniel watched through the window as she paced slowly, speaking in a low, controlled voice. Not panicked, not upset, controlled. After several minutes, she returned and handed the phone back. "Someone's coming," she said. "They're about 20 minutes away." Daniel nodded. "You want some coffee while you wait?" She hesitated briefly, then smiled. "That would be nice." Inside, he bought 2 cups. They sat at a small plastic table near the window. The storm continued raging outside, but inside felt calm, almost peaceful. "You're a good man, Daniel," she said quietly. He frowned slightly. "I didn't tell you my name." For just a second, barely noticeable, she seemed to study him. Then she smiled again. "You mentioned it when you handed me your phone." Daniel couldn't remember doing that, but before he could question it further, headlights swept across the gas station windows. A black SUV pulled into the lot. Elena stood. "That's my ride." She paused at the door and looked back at him one last time. "Thank you," she said, And this time, it sounded deeper than simple gratitude. Daniel watched as she stepped into the SUV. The vehicle idled for only a moment before pulling away, disappearing into the storm. He sat there for a while longer, staring at the empty road. Something about the night felt unfinished. But eventually, he finished his coffee, returned his truck, and drove home, unaware that by sunrise, everything he thought was ordinary would begin to unravel. The pounding on Daniel Harper's door didn't sound like a mistake. It sounded like authority. It was still dark outside when the first bang shook him awake. Daniel's eyes snapped open. For a second, he didn't know where he was. The red glow of his digital clock read 6:12 a.m. His body was heavy from only a few hours of sleep, and the storm from the night before had faded into a dull drizzle. Then it came again. Bang, bang, bang. Not a neighbor, not a delivery, not someone casually knocking. Someone demanding, "Mr. Daniel Harper, open the door." The voice was firm, commanding, and carried the unmistakable tone of law enforcement. Daniel's heart began pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. His mind raced instantly through everything he'd done in the past year. Unpaid tickets? No. Taxes? Filed. Work issues? Nothing serious. He lived a simple life. Warehouse job, small rented house, quiet neighborhood. So why were armed voices at his door before sunrise? He threw off his blanket and pulled on a hoodie over his t-shirt. His palms were already sweating. The knock came again, louder this time. His neighbor's porch lights flicked on one by one outside. Curtains shifted. He stepped slowly toward the front door. For a brief moment, he considered not answering. But that wasn't an option. He leaned forward and looked through the peephole. 3 figures stood on his porch. Dark, tactical uniforms. Protective vests. Utility belts. 2 of them had visible sidearms. The third held what looked like a folder. And parked behind them at the curb was a black SUV. The same type he had seen at the gas station. A chill ran down his spine. He opened the door halfway. "Yes." "Mr. Daniel Harper?" the man in the center asked. "Yes. You need to come with us." The words felt like ice water poured over his head. "Come with you? Why? What's this about?" "We'll explain shortly. Please cooperate." Daniel looked from one agent to the other. Their expressions were neutral, not angry, not aggressive, but not friendly either. "Am I under arrest?" he asked carefully. "No," the lead agent replied, "but this is time sensitive." That did not make him feel better. His neighbors were fully watching now. Mrs. Donnelly across the street stood frozen on her porch in her robe. A teenage boy next door was recording from behind a curtain. Daniel swallowed hard. "Can I at least change?" "You have 2 minutes," the agent said. Daniel stepped back inside, his thoughts spiraling. His brain immediately jumped to the only unusual thing that had happened recently. Elena, the stranded woman, the black SUV, the way she had known his name. His stomach dropped. Had he helped someone dangerous? A fugitive? A criminal? Was he now considered an accomplice? He quickly pulled on jeans and shoes, grabbed his wallet, and checked his phone. No missed calls. No warnings. When he stepped back outside, the rain had stopped, but the sky was still heavy and gray. The agents escorted him calmly, but firmly, toward the SUV. One opened the back door for him. As he sat down, the door shut with solid, final sound. The vehicle pulled away. Daniel's house grew smaller in the side mirror, along with the curious stares of his neighbors. The inside of the SUV was silent except for the low hum of the engine. One agent sat beside him, another in the front passenger seat. The driver kept his eyes on the road. Daniel tried again. "Can someone please tell me what this is about?" "You'll receive clarification soon," the agent beside him replied. That wasn't clarification. The drive felt endless, even though it couldn't have been more than 30 minutes. They passed through parts of town Daniel had never paid much attention to: industrial zones, office complexes, fenced government-looking properties. Finally, the SUV turned into a secured parking lot surrounded by high fencing and cameras. The building ahead was large, gray, and unmarked except for a small federal emblem near the entrance. Daniel's pulse quickened. They led him inside through security doors that required key cards. The The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. Everything smelled sterile, like metal and polished floors. He wasn't handcuffed, but he didn't feel free. After passing through a scanner and metal detector, they guided him down a long hallway lined with closed doors. At the end, they stopped at a plane conference room. "Wait here," the lead agent said. Daniel stepped inside. The room was simple. A metal table for chairs, a pitcher of water, no windows. The door shut behind him with a soft click that echoed louder in his mind than it actually was. He sat down. His knee began bouncing uncontrollably. He replayed the night before in his head. The broken car, the rain, the coffee. Her words, "You're a good man, Daniel." The way she had looked at him, as if measuring something, and then the SUV. His chest tightened. The door handle turned. Daniel straightened instantly. The door opened, and Elena walked in. But she wasn't the same woman from the highway. Gone was the soaked jacket and vulnerable expression. Now she wore a sharp navy suit. Her hair was neatly styled. Her posture was confident, composed, authoritative. 2 agents followed behind her and remained near the door. Daniel stared. "You," he whispered. She studied him carefully before speaking. "Good morning, Mr. Harper." "What is this?" His voice cracked slightly. "Why am I here?" She took the seat across from him. "My name is Special Agent Elena Marquez." The words seemed to echo in the room. Daniel blinked several times, as if his brain refused to process them. "Special Agent?" he repeated. "Yes." She folded her hands calmly on the table. "Last night, I was conducting an undercover field operation involving a criminal trafficking network operating across state lines." Daniel felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. "You were undercover?" he asked. "Yes." "My car breaking down was not part of the plan," she added, "but it created an unexpected variable." "Variable?" Daniel's voice rose. "I thought you needed help." "I did," she said evenly, "but not in the way you think." Daniel pushed his chair back slightly, overwhelmed. "So what, was I being tested?" "No," she said firmly. "You were observed." His stomach dropped again. "Observed how?" "For months, our agency has been monitoring how this trafficking network identifies potential transport drivers. They often use stranded vehicles along isolated highways as signals." Daniel's mind struggled to catch up. "Signals?" She nodded. "Drivers who stop without hesitation are sometimes approached later by couriers posing as desperate travelers. It's a recruitment method." Daniel's face went pale. "You think they're going to approach me?" "One of our suspects arrived at the gas station last night after you left," she said carefully. "He asked the clerk about the pickup truck parked outside earlier. That was you." A cold wave spread through Daniel's body. "He saw me?" "Yes." Silence filled the room. The weight of it pressed down on him. "So now what?" Daniel asked quietly. "Am I in trouble?" Elena's expression softened just slightly. "No, Mr. Harper, you are not in trouble." "Then why am I here?" "Because," she said, holding his gaze, "you may now be on their radar." The words settled heavily between them. Daniel had stopped to help a stranger, and somehow, overnight, he had stepped into something far bigger than he ever imagined. The room felt smaller after Elena's last words. "You may now be on their radar." Daniel sat frozen, staring at the metal table as if it might offer answers. His ordinary life, warehouse shifts, grocery runs, quiet weekends, suddenly felt fragile. "On their radar? How serious is that?" he finally asked. Elena didn't rush a response. "The network we're investigating doesn't randomly recruit people," she explained. "They look for individuals who are helpful, discreet, and unlikely to ask too many questions. Isolated highways are part of their system. A stranded vehicle isn't always a breakdown. Sometimes it's bait." Daniel felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air conditioning. "So last night, was your car bait?" "No," she said firmly. "My breakdown was real, but the location was already under surveillance because we suspected the network was using that route. When you stopped, you weren't part of a trap, but you were seen." Daniel leaned back in his chair, trying to steady his breathing. "I was just trying to help." "And that matters," she said quietly. But criminals don't see kindness the way the rest of us do. They see opportunity. She slid a thin folder across the table toward him. Inside were grainy surveillance photos taken at the gas station. One showed Daniel's truck parked under the lights. Another showed a man in a dark jacket speaking to the clerk. "That's one of our suspects," Elena said. "We believe he arrived looking for someone." "For me? We can't be certain, but the timing suggests he noticed your vehicle." Daniel's throat went dry. "What happens now?" Elena folded her hands again, her tone shifting from explanation to reassurance. "First, you're not under arrest. You're not accused of anything. You did nothing wrong. In fact, your willingness to help is exactly what separates you from people we investigate." He let out a slow breath. "Second, we're going to put protective measures in place. Temporarily. Increase patrol presence near your home. Monitoring of unusual activity. If anyone approaches you, contacts you, or asks you to transport anything, you inform us immediately." Daniel stared at the photos again. "This is insane," he murmured. "Yesterday I was just a guy driving home from work." Elena allowed herself a faint smile. "And today you still are. The difference is that you now have more information." He looked up at her. "Why tell me all of this? Wouldn't it be easier to just watch from a distance?" She paused before answering. "Because uncertainty creates panic, and panic leads to mistakes. We'd rather you be informed than frightened." He nodded slowly. That made sense, but fear still lingered. "What if they come to my house?" "They won't," she said calmly. "Not directly. Networks like this operate subtly. If they approach you, it will be casual, friendly. Someone claiming they saw you help a stranded woman. Someone needing a favor. That's how they work." Daniel felt anger spark in his chest for the first time. "They use people's kindness against them?" "Yes." The word hung heavy in the air. For a moment, silence filled the room again. Daniel's thoughts drifted back to the highway. The rain, the decision to stop, the voice in his head telling him to keep driving. If he had ignored Elena that night, none of this would be happening. But then another thought surfaced. If everyone ignored stranded people, what kind of world would that be? He looked at Elena. "Did anyone else stop?" She shook her head. "You were the only one." That answer landed differently than the rest. Not frightening. Clarifying. Elena continued. "In our line of work, we see people look the other way every day. It's easier, safer. But last night you didn't." Daniel gave a small, uneasy laugh. "Doesn't feel like it paid off." "Maybe not in comfort," she replied. "But in character, it did." He wasn't sure what to say to that. After another hour of discussion, reviewing contact numbers, emergency protocols, and safety reminders, the intensity in the room slowly eased. Elena stood, signaling the meeting was ending. "We'll drive you home," she said. As they walked down the hallway, Daniel felt different than when he had entered. Still nervous, still confused, but steadier. Outside, the morning had brightened. The storm clouds were breaking apart, revealing streaks of sunlight across the sky. On the drive back, the agents were quieter, less imposing, almost human. When they pulled up to his house, his neighbors pretended not to stare. Elena stepped out with him. "For the next few weeks, you may notice unmarked vehicles in the area," she explained. "Don't be alarmed. They're ours." Daniel nodded. She hesitated before adding something more personal. "I meant what I said last night." He looked at her. "You're a good man." There was no undercover tone now, no hidden agenda, just sincerity. Daniel swallowed. "I almost didn't stop." "But you did." That simple truth carried more weight than he expected. She extended her hand. He shook it. Then the SUV pulled away, leaving him standing in his driveway under a clearing sky. The following days were tense. Every unfamiliar car that drove slowly past his house made his pulse quicken. Every unknown number calling his phone made him hesitate before answering. But no one approached him. No strange request came. No friendly stranger asked for a ride. Weeks passed. Gradually, the unmarked vehicles disappeared. The extra patrols stopped. Life returned to its usual rhythm. Back to early alarms. Back to warehouse shifts. Back to grocery lists and quiet evenings. From the outside, nothing had changed, but inside, something had. Daniel found himself more aware of small choices, holding doors open, checking on elderly neighbors during cold nights, offering help without hesitation, but with awareness. He understood now that kindness wasn't weakness. It was strength, but it required wisdom. One evening, about a month later, he received a short message from a private number. Operation concluded. Several arrests made. Thank you for your cooperation. Yeah. He stared at the message for a long time. Somewhere out there, a dangerous network had been dismantled, not because of him alone, but because of the chain of decisions, investigations, and moments that connected, including one rainy night on a dark highway. Daniel stepped outside onto his porch. The air was cool and calm. Cars passed normally down the street. Children laughed in the distance. Ordinary life. He realized something powerful in that moment. Kindness will always carry risk, but indifference carries something worse. If he could go back to that night, to 11:47 p.m., rain pouring down, hazard lights blinking in the dark, would he stop again? He thought about it carefully. Then he smiled to himself. Yes, because sometimes doing the right thing doesn't make your life easier. It just makes it meaningful. And somewhere on some lonely road, someone might still be waiting for headlights to slow down. The real question isn't whether the world is dangerous. The real question is this: when your moment comes, will you stop